So the second presidential gender-based violence and femicide summit has concluded with even more louder calls to end the scourge of violence in this country. Activists not holding back in the last 2 days, especially while addressing government officials, including ministers, about the abuse of women and children in this country and all that they continue to endure. So here to talk about the process itself is one of the more vocal activists who was at this conference. That's founder of Kwanele Foundation, Sihle Sibisi, who's with us in our studios today. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I heard you giggling there as I was introducing you. I'm sure you've heard a lot of that over the past few days. And we shouldn't necessarily make it about that because the things you were raising were incredibly important. Hello, by the way. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Lovely to have you here. You know, it's one thing to be in a room, to be given a mic, and it's another completely to feel heard.
Yeah.
To what extent do you reckon you were heard this past few days?
Well, I think I can measure the level of being heard by the actions that will come after the issues that I raised. After I raised issues, it was only one minister that came to me and wanted to understand exactly where I was coming from. And I want to applaud him. It was Minister Kwanele who approached me and said, help me understand the frustration that NPOs are facing on the ground. Other ministers never did. Well, maybe it's because they were busy with other things, so I don't want to label them as not coming forth. But I think the satisfaction or the delight of saying we were heard will only be amplified once we see results. Implementation, and when ministers stop just talking without action.
Right. And that was the complexity even leading into the summit. You know, on the one hand, you have people who are saying it's incredibly important to have, even at a presidential level, the kind of support for discussions around the scourge of gender-based violence because of how prevalent the problem is. On the other side of the same coin, there are real concerns that they end up being just talk shops. Talks about talks that don't, you know, lead up to any kind of material change. You work on the ground. Speak to us about the value of something like the summit we had this week, if any.
I just had this small giggle because I'm thinking to myself, I pray to God, our ancestors and the universe that be, that after the summit, with the resolutions taken, implementation will be seen. We will feel the change. It will no longer just be on paper, on theory, because we know we've got till the end of November to actually put the document up of all the resolutions so that it can be presented to the country. But the concern is, summit is over, what now?
Yeah.
What happens? Do we go back to NPOs who are not resourced? Do we go back to police stations where we're faced with police members who are unhappy, who also have mental, psychological issues? Do we go back to courts where we will continuously see brown envelopes? Do we go back to systems where our ministers see themselves as celebrities instead of servants? Because the difference is, if you can understand that you are in that position because you were voted into by the public and you are meant to serve, then the ball game completely changes. That way, we don't have to grovel and beg to say, assist us with resources, assist us with A, B, C, D, because you know your mandate. So, what now after the summit? Most NPOs, when we left there yesterday, we clapped. 13 billion is being pledged towards fighting the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. We clapped. Our president has conceded that, yes, indeed, since 2018, certain things that were put on paper have not been done. Okay, but my biggest concern is ministers never took accountability. Instead, when issues were raised to ministers, they were all passing the buck. If you say Minister A, for example, Minister Ronald Lamola, we are on courts on a daily as Kwanele Foundation and other NPOs. We see on a daily cases of gender-based violence and femicide which are either withdrawn, thrown out, or never come into, get concluded.
Sure.
And we see perpetrators getting bail. What are you saying to that, Mr. Lamola? His response was, our president signed into office that GBVF is #1 pandemic and such things shouldn't happen. I laughed. I said, OMG. 2 weeks ago, we were in Alexandra Court. Yet again, a man murdered his wife, he received 10,000 rand bail.
Yeah.
And I'm not xenophobic, but it was a foreign national. And the reason why I raised it is because most of these foreign nationals who will find themselves in these crimes have the financial muscle because they do businesses that give them quick money.
Sure.
So they have the financial muscle to come to court, pay, pass brown envelopes, and when you want to talk, you can't say much because at some point we were told we are going to be banned from the court.
Yeah, money seeming to silence justice. It's interesting you touch on the issue around courts because this very morning we had a really devastating headline story around a 3-year-old girl in Mpumalanga who we're told was raped by a neighbor. Bless you. And what happened, according to the mother of the 3-year-old girl, is that the NPA told her that they cannot prosecute until the girl turns 5. It is completely mind-boggling to us how that can be the case, if in fact that is what happened. But it obviously raised questions about ways through which what took place in Midrand can help that little girl. Because, you know, her life has changed forever in unimaginable ways. And, you know, one can only imagine what the mother is going through. But that's going to be, at least at the heart of those who are victims of gender-based violence, that's what they're going to be thinking about as we take stock of what's happened.
Let me tell you, I said to Minister Sihle when he came to speak to us, I said, Minister Sihle, in KZN, it's one of our hotspots. There's a girl who's been raped from the age of 8 years old. She's now 14 by a pastor. The reason why her case is always withdrawn is because DNA backlog. What are you saying to us? He's promised that by 2023, January, the backlog will be done with. And I'm saying I'm waiting, Mr. Minister, because this girl's justice, imagine she's been raped from the age of 8. She's been going through the court system from the age of 8. Every time she goes there, one technicality after another that will hinder prosecution. Coming to this 3-year-old girl, this is the exact example why we make noise and why I get angry. This is justice denied at its best. If really they are saying they cannot prosecute the perpetrator until the victim turns 5, guys, let our government step aside. Let us get professionals who know what to do and implement change. There is no way, as a woman and as a mother, myself, I would sit back and accept that my 3-year-old daughter, we must sit with the consequences from that rape for 2 more years because the system says we can only prosecute when the child is 5. What then happens to this child in that 2-year period? Psychologically, mentally, the child, the family, holistically. What then happens? You are giving the perpetrator a chance to either run away. You are giving the perpetrator to come up with more theories to change what has happened. Are you saying? And that is why most of the time, families who don't have voices or who don't have people like us who make sure that justice is achieved, they tend to turn a blind eye because they know that when I go to the courts or when I go to the police, nobody's going to help us. That is why we said to Minister Kwanele, the same way our government was able to find money under the rocks for COVID-19, find money under the rocks to make sure that you train our officers so that we don't have cases like this.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. In fact, what we're hearing now is that the suspect may be arrested for a different rape charge. It's a story we've heard before, right?
Yeah.
You speak about money.
Yeah.
Billions have been pledged this time around. The real concern, of course, is whether or not this money is going to go to the right places. How do we get that right, if at all, from your position?
How do we get it right? One thing I challenged the ministers with was we had private sector within us. And private sector said to us, we have the money, but it's an issue of trust. We don't trust government to give them money. And we don't know which NPOs to give the money. And we challenged them, we said, why then doesn't government take NPOs on the ground, facilitate, introduce us to these private sectors, be the bridge in between? So at the next summit we have, we NPOs are the ones that must account to you to say, you gave us this portion. What have we done in this period of 4 years with whatever you gave us? Because the reality is, without their funding, I state publicly, unashamedly so, Kwanele Foundation has never received even 1 rand or 2 cents from the government. Without their funding, our work speaks for itself. Without their funding, we are still working. Now, can you imagine many other organizations out there who are working twice as hard, twice as much like Kwanele Foundation without funding? Imagine if money came, resources came. This would make the voice amplified on a higher level regarding the scourge of GBVF. And that way, GBVF can be stopped and ended in our lifetime. So with money, we wait to see where that 13 billion will go to. Because we are tired of hearing people in power standing up saying, we have funded organizations, this money. But when we're sitting on the ground amongst ourselves and we ask ourselves, did you get the money? Nobody. So where's this money going to?
It's, I'm afraid, a question that we've asked in many other aspects of our lives, and it's really heartbreaking that it's, infiltrating even around the scourge of gender-based violence. Sihle, I am hoping you and I will be able to have a whole lot more of an optimistic conversation in a few years' time when the next summit sits, but we're going to have to leave it for today. Thank you so much for coming through and sharing with us your sentiments. Understandably, very heartfelt sentiments at that. Sihle Sibisi is the founder of Kwanele Foundation. They're doing amazing work trying to assist victims of gender-based violence and femicide in the country. Once again, Sihle, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.